Welcome back. We want to take a look at how we can actually do maybe like a real world question when we're talking about using subqueries in a database system. We're working with that student database schema we've been working with the entire time out of the Oracle by SQL example by Richard. But we want to look at how can we actually use information, how kind of a question can we ask that's going to actually reflect what kind of thing we really want to be solving with the database. And as you can see right here, we have inside this information, we're looking at a bunch of information like say, for example, students and teachers and grades and scores and all of that. And one of the things you're looking at when you're talking about education, especially I think people obsessed with metrics would be talking about, is what are the top performing locations? And this is something that, say, for example, realtors and other people would be using to like, oh, I want to find out where can we really market something information, like where can we like say this is the top performing schools, that kind of stuff. You know, people who are obsessed with that, ranking kind of thing, really would want to find that kind of information out. And so if we look at the schema right here, we can see, oh, I want to find out some information about that. And so if I'm looking at like, where am I going to find out, where are the top performing zip codes that look at this? If I could get like, say, some publicly information off of a database or something like that, they might exist out there, or other information people may be selected into. Like maybe you want to buy the results of, say, the ACT scores and use that for marketing purposes. Could be. But what we want to do is like, oh, I want to find out where are those best scores happening. So I'm like, okay, I've got zip code right here, and students have a zip code, so I can get that information, so I can grab that information. But to get that, to get the information like what the scores are, I have to go up here and I have to make sure I go look up here at grades. So I have to do some joins onto that, and I also have to calculate, oh, what is the max score on that, or the average score on that, so I can find that out. So it's okay. So I've got to first figure out what the average score is of that numeric score, and like, oh, I'm like picking on, say, for example, the high final score. I'd be doing that, and so I'd have to do a query based on that first to find out what that max is right that. And that's going to be one of my nested inner queries. And then I'm going to have to join those results to this other information like enrollment and students, so I can get that matching zip code information, so I can identify where are those at that actually have that max information. And so that's what we have to do, is we have to figure out how can I put together those pieces to figure out what is that score. And so I look at the schema situation or the database information that I know, and I use that so I can actually put together those pieces. And so that's how we're going to put this together, is we need to find out those pieces like that so we can figure out what are those best score, the top performing zip codes to find that out. So we're going to identify that using a subquery and go ahead and put that together. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we need to do that. So the first thing we have to do when we're working with this is we identify that inner question. What's the first thing we have to know to actually identify that? That's where our first inner query comes into play. So what we're looking at right now is I'm going to look at the average final grade, and that from grade G, where the final grade of type is final. So I want to get the average final score, because that's like, oh, I want to find out which ones are above that average. The first step I have to do is actually calculate what that amount is. And so this is our inner query, our subquery we're working with. And because I'm getting a function result of an aggregate function, this is what we can call a scalar subquery, because again, it's only giving me exactly one answer. And average is one single square that we're working with inside that table. So if I run this query right here, boom, the average score on that is 85.77. And again, notice I'm always using my as right here, because I always want to make sure I give my proper naming for what I'm working with that. And so my average final is that 85.77. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So now our next step is we want to find all the information that's bigger than that. So we want to find all the people that have a score greater than that. So that's where our next query comes into play. So I'm going to go ahead and just collapse that out. We're going to go to our next query right here. I'm going to select from grade GR. I'm going to grab the student ID and numeric grade, where it's matching that same final thing. Because again, I only want to look at the finals on this. And I'm going to group by the student ID and the numeric grade, because I'm using the having right here of using that value, but I'm going to put inside that having, instead of that just hard-coded value of 50, or 85.77, which would be on a where clause, I'm going to use it so it's going to be having, and it's going to be the result of that lovely clause right here, greater than the average of this. And so I'm going to grab this lovely subquery right here, schlorp, and copy that in. And instead of just having it on that 50, we're going to go right here and do our lovely vertical parens, because that's how we separate everything out with that. And inside that, I'm going to put my new query, paste it right in, and we're just going to tab everything in nice and pretty, because we like things to look nice. There we go. And we're going to tab that in one more time. Tab, there we go. Looks nice. There we go. Great look. And so again, I still have that same subquery right here that I can just run that alone, and it compiles just fine, that 85.77, great. And I'm going to grab this right here and use that as my inner query and plunk that together, and I get 91 rows that are greater than the average with this. So I'm using that having clause right here to get that average as a result for that. So I have my student IDs, and Now, I know I don't want to share that private information that student IDs because that's not actually what I want to share. But again, if I go back to my schema, that what we're looking at, in order to link that zip code information to there, I have to tie that back to my student. And so I'm going to extract out that student data, of course, because I don't want to share that student's private data. But I want to be able to make sure I can actually figure out where are those cool performing schools? Where are they located at? Where are those amazing students we want to actually, like market to our real estate people, saying, hey, this is a great space to build houses because this is where all the cool kids exist. And so I have to use that information right here, that student ID, to link back to that. And so that's where I'm going to go for that next query right here that we have to do. And so our next inner query, this is the new inner query. So I'm going to take this outer query combination structure, and I'm going to place that over here into this new, more complex query. Let me scroll this down just a smidge. And so as you can see, I have my select row num and a dot and a colon and student zip as top zips because we want to know those top zips. And I have my student stu. I'm going to join that to enrollment enter. And I'm enjoying that enrollment on student ID, matching student ID, because I have that primary key, foreign key path we've been working with the entire time. And I'm joining that back to grade and matching the student grade and the student section ID, because again, it's a two-part primary key, so that means I need to join both of them to correctly match those values because we want to have the proper amount of data. And then again, I'm still using that where clause right here, matching them final grades, because that's all I'm looking at. But I'm going to have that grade student ID and their numeric grade is in this subquery. So I collapse that subquery down. That's that same subquery I was just working with right here, that nested subquery. So we can nest subqueries, again, 3 levels deep right here because this one's inside this one, inside this one. And so I just collapse that all the way down inside that. And now I have this new subquery. I'll run this one. Just grab the code right here to select it and run it. And now I have my top zips. I've got 112 rows. But I only want to get the top ones. So let's make this so it's a really big, so that's 112, that's really hard to market to that. Let's go ahead and let's turn this into something that we could make clickbaity. And we can make this so we can really explain what we're working, like, hey, this is why you really want to live here. And so what we do is just go right here, and we'll just add another and clause into our where to restrict our values. And the last thing we're going to do is just do and then we'll say row num is less than or equal to, because we want to use equal to because we want it's an inclusive comparator, and we use 10 because, again, remember we're talking about databases, we always use the 1 through 10 counting system that humans are regularly used to. And so I just add that right there. I hit play on this lovely query right here, and my top zips, boom, I have my top 10 rows of who are the best zip codes to go to get high scores, and it's ranked right there in order. I've got the best scores right there. We've got wonderful stuff. And we did this by combining multiple nested queries to get a result, but that's how we make that happen, do some really cool stuff. Thanks again, cheers, and have a great day.